Next thing, lack of trust of others' motives. And this is kind of like some of what you had to say. So there's an inherent fear that if I begin to act cooperatively, or if I start thinking about what's good for the collective and not worrying so much about protecting my own immediate interests, my fear might be that I'm going to get taken advantage of by all you other folks out there who are only in it for yourselves. So there's a negative assumption about other people. So what do we do about that? And this is gonna sound like a digression, but it's an important digression. How many of you know anything about game theory? Have you ever heard of Prisoner's Dilemma? A few of you. Okay, I'm gonna tell you a quick little story about Prisoner's Dilemma. So back in about the 50s, economists started trying to predict people's behavior because they wanted to know what people would do with the market. And they started to run this game called Prisoner's Dilemma, in which very simply there are two prisoners. They've both been arrested for the same crime. They're being interrogated by the clever police in two separate rooms, and the hope by the police, of course, is that they'll rat each other out. Economists wanted to see what people would do. Would they, A, defect, that is, throw the other person under the bus, or would they, B, do something that was for the collective good and say, you know, neither of us did it, I didn't do it, I know he didn't do it, we're both innocent, on the hope that they'd both do the same thing and both of them get out of there. What do you think people did when they started running this game and they had a choice either to save themselves by ratting out the other guy, or take a risk that the other guy wouldn't rat them out and do what was probably best for both? What do you think they did?
Save themselves.
They did. They absolutely did. And so economists thought for a long time this is how people behave. What happened was, a little bit later, social psychologists and a bunch of other people got involved, and they started running the game using computers. So they could run it not once, but over and over and over and over again. And what they found still holds up today, that when you run the game over and over and over again, people learn over time that there's a way to get the best outcome. And the way to get the best outcome is a pattern called tit for tat, that very basically is, you start off with a cooperative move, and then if the other person keeps on cooperating, you keep on cooperating, and everybody comes out pretty good. But if the other person comes back with a defect, throws you under the bus, you come back with one defect, proportionately speaking, and then you come back to a cooperative move. When people do that, when they play the game over and over and over again, and remember this is done by computers, so there's statistical data that shows that over time what happens is people shape each other's behavior. So if you have one person sitting in the game who knows the pattern and does that intentionally, the other person will eventually learn the pattern and do it as well, because that outcome is the best for everybody. So why do I go into that long, drawn-out story? Because when people act for the greater good, of course, it's best for everybody who is a part of that organization. It's the old rising tide lifts all boats. So we have to get people to buy into the idea that what's best for the greater good, as long as it's an organization or an entity of which I am a part, which ultimately is the human race, let's face it, we're all part of that, that it's really good for us too, even though it might not be good for me tomorrow, but it will be good for me in the long run. So again, if we're above the cornfield, we're thinking about the big picture, and we realize that what's in it for the whole is also good for me, okay, we're partway down the road. The other things is, you know, part of tit for tat is modeling trust and openness. We have to behave that way ourselves to get other people to go along with us, and also to make everybody aware of somehow that we have that ultimate shared interest, whether it's just as members of the human race, or members of the same community, or members of the same church, or the same profession, or the same organization.